Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to put together a tier list of all of the decks in Balatro, doing a little bit of a discussion on each of them. Obviously, this is just my opinion based on how I play the game of Balatro. Everyone has their own specific strategies that they like, which is going to mean some decks they might like better than me or dislike some that I like. But I'm going to start right at the beginning with the red deck. Kind of a basic one, of course, the one you start out with. It's a +1 discard every round, and I'm going to drop this one right in the mediocre section. Now, my 4 tiers are going to be at the top are my faves, which are my favorite decks, and then right below that, I have a cut above is basically the decks that I like a little bit more than the ones that are in the mediocre category, and then at the bottom, I have the ones that are just kind of meh. The next deck in our list is blue deck, and I'm going to slot that one right in here next to the red deck on mediocre. And it kind of depends what type of hand strategy you're going for, whether you'd prefer red or blue. If you're going more for like a flush strategy, then having more discards is probably a little bit more beneficial, whereas with blue deck, having an additional hand might benefit, easier hands to make, like high card pair hands that you can ramp up and perhaps get the kind of jokers that are more benefited by additional hands that you can play, but slotting that one in the mediocre category. The next deck is the yellow deck. You're going to start with an extra $10. I actually kind of like this deck probably more than your average person likes it. I like starting off with a strong economy, starting to build up that interest, and it also allows me to perhaps be a little bit more liberal with my purchasing early on because of that extra money that you're starting off with. I like to build a bit of a bank early on to max out that interest earlier. Starting off with that $10 extra is very helpful. I actually like this one a little bit more than the red and blue deck. Going to slot it just in a slight above, a cut above those other two decks for me. Moving on to the next one is the green deck. So at the end of each round, per hand remaining, you're going to get $2. Per remaining discard, you're going to get $1, except you don't earn any interest. And whenever I'm playing through runs, I like maxing out that interest and then using the vouchers to increase that interest or potentially some jokers to help that economy situation. Not having access to interest is something I'm not a big fan of, and it's really a deck effect that I'm not all that into, so I'm going to slot it right there into the meh category. Next up on the list is black deck, and it does have a nice effect with that +1 joker slot, so you get 6 instead of 5 being the standard, but that -1 hand every round is pretty punitive, and actually because of that, the gold stake for a lot of people is maybe more difficult with black deck than any of these other decks. And given that difficulty, especially on the gold stake, I'm going to slot this one down there in the meh category next to the green deck. Next up on the list is the magic deck. So starting a run with Crystal Ball voucher, so +1 to the consumable slot, you'll have 3 instead of 2, and then you also get 2 copies of the Fool early on, which is really nice if you're trying to make a flush deck. If you get the right tarot card, and then you can double it. If you get the right planet card early on, you can make 2 copies of that to really level that one up early on. So those Fool cards can come in handy in a lot of ways early in the round. I think this one slots in to a cut above, a little bit above those mediocre decks. Next up is going to be the Nebula deck. Start a run with the Telescope voucher. I love this. Celestial packs always contain the planet card for the most played poker hand. This is one of my favorite vouchers, so getting it to start is great. Now, the downside to this is -1 to the consumable slot. So there is a little bit of a give and take there, but just the fact that it starts with Telescope, which is a voucher that I love so much, means that I have to slot this one up there in at least a cut above, and I'm going to slot it right above the magic deck. Moving right along, the next one is Ghost deck, and this is a lot of people's favorite deck, and I am in that category. So spectral cards may appear in the shop. You also start with Hex card. It's going to add polychrome to a random joker. So basically, the first joker that you like that you're buying, you can add a polychrome to it. Great thing that we're going to have there to start with, and then spectral cards can just be so powerful. Getting those in the shop is a really nice benefit to have. So I'm going to slot this one up there in my favorites. The next deck is another deck that I really like, the Abandoned deck. Start the run with no face cards in your deck. And a lot of times I like having a deck that has less cards in it because it just means it's that much easier to try to find the cards that I want to make the hands that I'm looking for. The Abandoned deck is actually a little bit better for different strategies than what my main one is, which is flushes. It makes 2 pair, straights, those kind of hands really doable. Now, the downside to the Abandoned deck is there's a number of jokers that are really strong with face cards. So obviously not having those face cards in there early on can be a negative detriment to that. But I found success with this deck. I really like it. And actually, I'm going to put it right up there in my favorites. The next one is the Checkered deck. This was the first deck that I defeated the gold stake with, and I recommend anyone who's trying to get to that gold stake to use this deck to do so. It makes getting those flush hands really easy because you're going to start with 26 spades and 26 heart cards. It's really easy to use that flush strategy, especially with the Checkered deck. It has a special place in my heart given the fact that it was the first gold stake victory that I was able to get. So I'm going to slot it right up there in my favorites. Next one here is the Zodiac deck. So you're going to start a run with a Tarot Merchant. So Tarot cards appear 2 times more frequently in the shop. And then Planet Merchant. So Planet cards are going to appear 2 times more frequently in the shop as well. And you're also going to get Overstock, which is a +1 card slot available in the shop. So instead of the 2 standard, it's going to be 3 for each shop that you go into. Now, a reason that I don't love this one is because it can get kind of frustrating when you're looking for jokers and you're trying to roll them in your shop, and you just keep having Planet and Tarot cards popping up that you don't necessarily want to use all the time. The compensation for this is the fact that you're going to get Overstock, which is going to get an additional slot there in your shop, so you don't have to worry about that quite as much. But still, with that being the case, I'm going to slide this one into the mediocre area above the red and blue deck. There's definitely ways that this deck can be very powerful, but it's just not one of my favorites that I like to use. Next up, we have the Painted deck. So +2 to the hand size, -1 to the Joker slot. I really don't like the negative side of this deck, only having a base of 4 Joker slots. And getting that +2 to the hand size isn't something I necessarily need. Now, perhaps it makes it a little bit better for some of these really powerful either Jokers, Spectral cards, things that are so strong that they bring a -1 to your hand size is a little less of an issue with something like the Painted deck. But I'm not a huge fan of this one, and I'm going to throw it down in the meh category above green and black deck. Next one up is the Anaglyph deck. This is one of my favorite decks. So after defeating each boss blind, you gain a double tag. And the reason why I like this so much is I like storing up those double tags, which is going to give you a copy of the next selected tag. So in your run, if you get something like the tag that gives you a rare Joker, the ones that give you negative Jokers, the investment one to bolster your economy, there's just a lot of specific tags that I like to use. And if I have a whole stack of double tags loaded up and ready to go, it can really break things and make things extremely strong. Also, this is a great deck to use if you want to go after getting a gold sticker on all of the Jokers, because if you can load up on those double tags and then use them to get the negative tag to get as many Jokers as you can up in your Joker area to defeat that gold stake and get that sticker on those Jokers. So I really like this one. I'm going to toss it up there right in my favorites, just 1 slot below the Ghost deck, but actually I could even make an argument that I like it even more than that. These ones are pretty similar there at the top. All right, getting closer to the end. So next we have the Plasma deck. A lot of people like this one because it balances the chips and the multiplier when calculating the score for your played hand. But the downside to this one is it's a 2x base blind size. So you're going to need to score more and more as you're working through those antes. It's double what a typical deck would be. Now, it's pretty broken early on as it balances the chips with the multiplier to get your score. But this one was actually a little bit harder for me to defeat the gold stake than many of the other decks because you really need to ramp up your scoring and focus a lot on the chips because it's going to balance out with the mult, and then kind of switch over more to getting that multiplier higher as you work your way through. But still, nonetheless, I do think it's better than meh. I'm going to slot it in to mediocre, particularly for that gold stake, the fact that it can be a little tricky to defeat the gold stake with the Plasma deck. And at those higher stakes with the 2x to the base blind, particularly in the 8th ante, if you're running into the wall boss that makes things even higher, it can be pretty tricky to defeat that one. Last but not least, we have the Erratic deck. So all ranks and suits in the deck are randomized. This can be a really strong one, and actually you can kind of cheese it where you just re-roll this deck. Every time you start a run, you can just look at the cards in your deck to see if it's one that you would like to use. And if you don't like the cards that are showing in there, you can just start a new run, re-roll it, and try to get that mixture of cards that you're looking for. So because of that cheese strategy, it can actually be extremely strong. But I don't like it quite as much as the ones that are in my favorites, so I'm going to slot it right at the top end of a cut above. So that is the final tier list here. Obviously, different people are going to use different strategies as their preferred way to play Balatro, so you might have some disagreements with me on these different rankings that I've given the decks. So please let me know about that down in the comment section. But that'll end this one, so I appreciate you guys stopping by. Consider subscribing to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you back here for more Balatro content in the future.